There is a lot of discourse around the topic of coming out as an atheist. I've heard great advice as well as advice so terrible it would literally put your life in jeopardy. Now, I want to call out some of that while also not overloading your anxiety about coming out with a ton of do's and a ton of don'ts that just rack your mind. And we will also go over some things to consider before coming out, things that I didn't necessarily think about or even realize until after I had come out already. Now, there's a few very well-known reasons for not wanting to come out that are very surface level. One of those being they just aren't ready to come out. And at the end of the day, I want to make it clear that this is your choice, this is your life, and don't let anybody, including me, tell you when that right time is to do it. Another reason is social pressures. Social pressures keep people from coming out. And I'm going to go over a few other things that kind of hold up that pressure here in a minute. But I've also seen in the atheist community some social pressures to come out. And while I sort of get where they are coming from, I also don't like the kind of shame that comes in tandem with this, oh, well, you need to come out. Don't you value truth? If you value truth, I've even heard, if you don't value truth or coming out as an atheist, then you might as well not be an atheist. And I think that is gross and bad advice, and you shouldn't listen to that. And another basic reason for not coming out is that it's nobody's frickin' business. At the end of the day, it's not your business what I am. It's not your business what I like, what I don't like, what I believe, what I don't believe, my sexuality, my favorite TV show, none of that. It's none of your business. At the end of the day, we choose who to allow into our life, into our circles, and what information we're going to pass over to this family member or this friend or this coworker or this boss. And so those are the few main reasons, and I'm not going to hit on them so much as I'm going to kind of bring them up every now and again throughout the rest of the video. Now, before I go over the crucial reasons for not coming out, we need to go over my ridiculous scale. Now, this closet atheist scale isn't really a scale because as you'll see, it's not necessarily a complete spectrum, as sometimes you will find yourselves at number 2 or number 8 on the scale, depending on, where you are or whether it's with family or friends or things like that. Consider this scale different pools. Some of them overlap, some of them are farther away from each other, and it really ties into your own life and your own circumstances. But let's go over that now. So I made a little graphic. It looks like absolute shit. I give each of the numbers on this scale sort of an analogy, and you're going to find out that it's a little silly, but bear with me because I have reasons for putting these into different categories, as I feel that you will at least fall into one of them. And it's important to be aware of where you're falling on this sort of scale or which pool you fall into, as whenever it comes to coming out or how to stay in the closet, because I want to also go over something I don't hear a lot of atheists talk about, other than maybe comment sections, on when it's necessary to stay in the closet and what things to stay away from, so to speak, if that is your goal. Because after we go over the scale, I'm going to go over some detrimental reasons as to why some people don't want to come out. But all the way over here at 10, you have the door completely shut, but you are acting, you are fronting, you are completely, to those around you, a Christian still. You might go to church. You might be a leader in your church still, which I'm going to have advice for people who find themselves as atheists, even though they still have a role in the church, as we've gone over on this channel before. But if you find yourself in this pool, there are certain reasons why you probably do it. You might be relying on a sort of income that you can't really get away from at the moment, or maybe you're under the care of somebody else, and if you don't go to church, you're on your own, pal. Number 9 is the door is shut, it's locked, with furniture completely covering the doorway of the closet, and not a single peep is coming out of you. So anybody walking around in this analogous room or metaphorical room would have no clue that you're even in there, let alone the fact that that closet even exists. Number 8, the door is shut, but you don't act like a Christian, and you also don't act like an atheist. Now, I know there is no such thing as really acting like a Christian and acting like an atheist, but for the people who are in this pool, they know exactly what I'm talking about. And if you've ever been in this pool, you also know exactly what I'm talking about. You kind of go through life, you don't necessarily, oh yes, amen, yes, Jesus helped me. But then you also just roll over the Christian comments. You don't necessarily say, oh, well, I don't believe in that. You just kind of go with the flow. A lot of atheists will take this approach whenever it comes to Thanksgiving dinner and the family members who don't know that they are atheists. They won't be outwardly atheists about, their beliefs, their thoughts, their political opinions, but also they're not necessarily going to be hopping on the train to say the prayer. Number 7 is that you have the door completely shut still, but you are strategically choosing when to speak and when not to speak. With people who are in this pool, it's usually, around family members or co-workers, and you might say something that might raise their eyebrow. You might say, oh, well, I don't really believe like that, if they mention a certain teaching in the Bible, and this may come across as a red flag to them, but you still say it nonetheless. But depending on who it is, you are strategically choosing what battles to pick, what conversations to actually have that also keep you in the closet still. You get what I mean? Number 6, the door is shut, peeping and coughing only around certain people. Now, this isn't necessarily the stage where certain people know that you're an atheist. These are, I'll debate this theological type of idea with my father, but definitely not my mother. Or I'll say these things around my uncle and my brother, but I'm keeping it away from the parents and the grandparents. This is another step, and why I'm saying that this isn't necessarily a scale, as this fits in with the last one on choosing when to speak and what things to say in the right setting. Now, this is what I meant by my graphic is a little ridiculous and silly, because number 5 is you are in the closet with the door shut, and you're kind of just, kitty pawing underneath the door. When you see like a little cat paw, just like, and you just want to like give it a high five. You're kind of doing that. Now, this is where most red flags come from, and this is where family members might start to begin to ask you, are you losing your faith in God? If you've ever experienced this as an atheist who was trying to stay in the closet, but also could not keep your mouth shut on that one freaking topic. And then, bam, all of a sudden people are asking, I don't know about Hayden. I think he might be backsliding, or some of your church leaders are wondering and start to ask like, hey, can we have a counseling moment? Could we sit you down, next Saturday evening about 5 o'clock? Let's talk about some things. Let's come to Jesus tonight. This is that one. Number 4 is the door is cracked and you are peeking out of that closet. You're starting to toe the line a little bit. You're not ready to just come out and be like, hey guys, I ain't a freaking Christian no more. But you also want to start dipping your toes in the water. At this stage, people are usually feeling out or sizing up family members to then decide whether it's a good idea or not to come out to them. And we're going to go over this specific thing in this video a little bit later down the road. Now, number 3, and a lot of atheists find themselves in this position in their earlier and mid stages, the door is open, but only to specific people. Now, most of the time it's usually a friend, or maybe it's another atheist friend that they knew back while they were a Christian, and they feel as if that's a safe person to say, like, hey, I'm starting to have doubts in my religion. Can you help me out? Or in my case, it's strangers on the internet that were atheists as well. It could also be a brother. It could also be a parent or a grandparent as well, but usually there's only a few of them. You've probably been here along your coming out journey, or you might be here in this part of your journey. Number 2, the door is open. People know you are an atheist, but you don't speak on it. Now, I tend to find that most atheists are in this bracket. Their family knows, people know that they're an atheist, but they're not very outspoken about it. They're not militant about their atheism. They roll with the amens. They roll with the I bless you, Lord Jesuses. They don't really combat it, but they're not very outspoken about it. It's where you find a lot of these, I'm not an atheist. Or it's not that I'm an atheist, I'm just not religious. Or, I just don't believe in God. There's an old joke by a comedian, I don't know who it is, and it's about her parents finding out about her not believing in God. And her parents came to her and said, I accept you for who you are. I'm just glad to find out that you're not an atheist. Because a lot of people, especially a lot of Christians, they view atheism not just as the simple lack of a belief in God as it is, but this, there is no such thing as God, and he is just horrible, and I hate him, and I want to... And certainly there are places for that type of atheism, but of course that's not all atheism. That's like looking at Christians as if they're part of the Westboro Baptist Church. That would be kind of foolish of me to say. But either way, moving on, number 1 is door is open, and you are outspoken about it, but strategically. Now, people usually do this to stay out of losing a specific family member. Maybe they kind of clap back on certain opinions that Christians have based on the Bible, or based on what their pastor tells them, or based on whatever is tied to their Christianity. But they also have a limit to how far they will go. And if you find yourself here, that's fine. You're basically all the way there at that point. And I want you to keep in mind that wherever you fall on in this scale, I don't want you to feel as if you need to move as close down to 0 as possible. However, if you do feel incongruent with yourself, number 1, talk to a therapist. Number 2, really reflect on that and think of the pros and the cons of, is coming out going to make me feel better, especially if it goes the way that I want it to? And we're going to go over exactly I'm going to give a few tips on coming out, because like I said in the beginning, I don't want to bombard you. This is already very anxiety ridden of a topic, of an experience, of something that will probably end up happening. And I don't want to add too many things to just think about and to stay away from, because you're already going to have a slew of emotions going on. And so I'm going to keep it as simple, tight as possible. And number 0, you are completely out to everybody. Plenty of people are like this. I'm not like this, because there are family members that still don't know. I probably will never tell them, but that falls back into my earlier simple reasons of, it's just none of their frickin' business. But for some people and other people, they do know to an extent. And if it's your goal to get down here, you need to keep some things in mind before coming out, because obviously coming out will get you as close to 0 on this scale as possible, as opposed to being at either 10, where you're just pretending to be a Christian. And so this brings us to what I originally wanted to mention at the beginning of this video, the crucial reasons for why somebody would not want to come out. And I am going to call these, just for simplicity's sake, we're going to call it the 4 pillars, as I'm going to refer back to it in this video. But for me, and what I notice, whether I'm reading coming out stories or stories of atheists or people who realize they're an atheist all of a sudden, and they're wondering how to come out and how to deal with telling their wife, or maybe their children, maybe they're in their 40s and they want to tell their child who they raised in Christianity, hey, I don't buy this shit that I fed to you all your life. I'm sorry, bud. There's community, financial, shelter and needs, and then abuse. And that's whether you're an adult or a child. Now, this is going to tie back to the scale. Now, let me quickly mention something about the scale that I forgot to put in. The 8 to the 4, this range right here, if you are trying to stay completely closeted, and if you do not want somebody to know, for whatever reason, just know that those pools, those brackets, those parts of the scale can potentially raise some red flags, raise some eyebrows, raise some suspicions. And so if you are, and your goal is to stay closeted for longer, as we're about to go over in just a minute, make sure you stay out of those. But back to the 4 pillars. So whenever it comes to community, a big reason people don't come out is because they're afraid of losing their community, their social net, so to speak. Maybe they're in a church, maybe they're not even in a church, but they know if they come out, they're going to lose all their family, all their friends. And this can be serious. And I see atheists shitting on people for not wanting to leave for this reason. And it's like, do you forget about the human experience? Do you forget about our social needs for a community? It's tough. Do you not remember your own deconstruction from Christian to atheist to whatever you are now? And so I want to take this as serious as possible. That's why I said I don't want to cram this down your throat. I don't want to make this too complicated. And I don't want to shame you for staying in number 7 or number 2 or wherever you are on the scale. At the end of the day, like I mentioned, it's your life and it's your decision. And you can only do this once per person. There's not really any backpedaling from there unless you want to lie or unless you find yourself not being an atheist anymore and you're honestly a Christian. That's really the only way. And there's also financial reasons. Maybe they'll lose a job. Specifically, obviously, like if they work in the church and that's their only source of income and there's not really a way for them to get out of this situation, at least for now. Maybe they need to hold off for a year. I've talked to people on Reddit before who found themselves atheists, but their lease doesn't end for another 8 months and there's not another job in the frickin' county. And so they had to stay closeted. They had to be on that 10 part of the scale, act like they were a Christian. And a lot of atheists have a problem with this, and for good reason, I will admit. However, if you find yourself stuck in a leadership role at the church, the best thing I think that you can do with what you've got going on is try to lead. Especially if you're working with children, try to teach them really good morals and ethics. Like, let that light of Christ shine through you. Maybe you have the opportunity to pick which Bible stories you want to teach. Now, obviously, you shouldn't go teaching the she-bears part of the Bible, to all the kids. That'll raise the red flags, but you might want to pick out specific things that teach kids, compassion, empathy, love, things like that, rather than the other ones that pastors like to point to teach a bunch of hate. But for whatever reason, people are staying in the atheist closet between community and financial needs. Guarantee they fall anywhere, and this is the broadest part of the point here, but they usually fall anywhere from 2 to 8. I don't tend to find those atheists in the 9 and 10 or the 1 and 0 mark on this scale. And that brings us to the other 2 pillars, shelter and needs and abuse. And these are a lot more serious. As you'll notice, these 4 pillars go from the least severe to the most severe. And so shelter and needs. The first thing you probably think of is a kid under their parents' rule. If they come out, their parents would be like, nope, you're coming to church with us, bud. And at the end of the day, sorry, kid, you got to go to church. But also, it can be a lot darker than that. You can be kicked out and homeless, as lots of homeless atheists around the country, lots of homeless gay kids who come out to their parents as gay and they kick them to the streets. Go look into some statistics from, Salt Lake City and the homeless youth population. Maybe it's that, you're an adult now, but your parents are paying for your college and you go to a Bible college and you're so close to being done with it and it's going to actually help you start your career, even if it's not a Bible college and they're paying for your needs. And now, no, I'm not automatically saying just lie to your parents to rip them off of money, but sometimes being in that position where it's your parents choosing what school you went to and you didn't get to choose that because, it's, oh, I'm paying for it, you better go to school, you're going to go to the school I freaking tell you to. Sometimes telling them can sweep your future right from under you. There goes your needs right there, your future needs. Because now you're not going to college anymore and potentially also homeless on top of that. But either way, there's tons of reasons that somebody would not want to come out and it being tied to their shelter and their needs. It could be a husband versus his wife or a wife versus her husband. It could be anything. And the 4th one being abuse. We've all heard it before. The kid who said, I'm tired of Jesus or I'm tired of going to church, and they get the absolute shoink beaten out of them. The fear of abuse, whenever it comes to coming out, is a serious thing, and usually it's coming from children, but it can also be with adults too. Plenty of women I've read about fearing about their non-belief now because what is my husband going to think? He already gets mad and beats me every now and again. I can only imagine when he gets the righteous anger of God within him to teach me a lesson. And so when it comes to shelter and needs and abuse, people usually find themselves from anywhere from 10 to 2, depending on the severity. Now, usually whenever you're dealing with abuse, you're pretty much going to act like you're a Christian the whole time, or you're just going to act like neither. You're locked up in the closet, you're hush, hush, shh, shh. You don't act like a Christian, but you also don't really, outwardly act out your atheism. You're kind of just in this normal state. You just go with the flow. And there are good reasons to keep staying in that position, because if your life is in freaking danger, whether you're a freaking 30-year-old woman or a 10-year-old boy, if your life is in stake, forget listening to the atheist telling you you're hurting the movement because of you staying in the closet. If there was more of us, the movement would be stronger. It's easier for people to come out, and certainly that part's true. But the one thing that matters most in this is your freaking safety. But those are the 4 crucial pillars of why somebody would want to stay closeted. And just remember, because we're going to refer to it a little bit later, there are also some people who are just worried about coming out because of the preconceived notions that they had about atheists back when they were a believer, or their presuppositions about what an atheist is. Imagine going through church, not only hearing and learning about what this group of people, these atheists, are like, and even perpetuating that yourself, and then you find out you don't believe anymore. This is where you get a lot of the people of, I don't believe in God, but I'm not an atheist, or I'm not a Reddit atheist, and I totally get that. But at that point, there's some work you got to do, because the atheist community is super diverse. There are racist pieces of shit atheists, and there are atheists that would give you the shirt off your back, just like there are racist Christians, and there's Christians who'd give you the shirt off their back. I know those aren't necessarily the two ends of a scale, but I'm just trying to compare 2 different odds, if you get what I mean. The atheist community is diverse. You're going to find good people, bad people, friendly people, funny people. You're going to find all kinds of different people in this community. And this type of person really could find themselves anywhere on the scale. It doesn't really matter where they're at, but what I do suggest for this type of person is to listen to atheists, talk to other ones, read some books, go read some posts, go ask questions. Even if you're not wanting to necessarily come out right now, learn a little bit. If you're afraid because of how people view you, you might end up finding out once you come out that a couple other people in your family are atheists as well. I can't tell you how many times people have come out to another person and the other person's like, yeah, I haven't told anybody, but me too. And so definitely got some work to work on if you have this preconceived, maybe not baby eating, mother murdering devil worshippers or whatever, but if you're worried about how you're going to be viewed just at a base level, that's valid, because we know how people view atheists. Hell, there's polling that shows that people would, and you know how much a lot of Christians hate Muslims. Most Christians would vote for a Muslim over an atheist. And there's other polling data to show exactly how atheists are viewed in this country, and you can look it up and you can be sad about it the rest of the night. But let's begin to talk about coming out, because whenever it comes to coming out, it's going to depend on who you're coming out to. How you come out to your brother. Kitty's having a snack. Either way, where was I? I let her eat for a couple minutes. So depending on who you're coming out to is going to change your method either drastically or just a little bit, because how you come out to your brother versus your coworker versus, your grandfather is going to be completely different. Maybe your coworker's always just blabbing on about Jesus, inviting you to church all the time, and maybe your coming out is as simple as just, hey man, I don't believe in that stuff anymore. I don't really want to come, but thanks for asking anyways. And then it's left at that. And then sometimes you can be with your grandfather and it is a 7-hour talk. But whenever it comes back to my goofy little scale, you might be a 2 around your parents, and a 7 around your grandparents, and then a 3 around your partner and your friends. That's why I said you're going to find yourself in at least one place on this scale, if not a good few, because there's, like I said, there are certain family members who don't know, period. I'm not a 10, I don't think, anywhere. I don't think I fake being a Christian, but I'm definitely a 9 around certain people. And again, some people don't need to know. It's none of their business. I have plenty of talks at work and on the streets, or people say we're talking about some issue. Maybe it's the weather over the past week, or some flash flood that happened, and they mention, oh, praise God, this and that. Aren't you glad that God's in your life? And I'm not going to start a whole argument right there. It sucks that I'm in that position that just stating, I don't really buy that, invites an entire new conversation, but that's just how the way it is. And so I just kind of roll with it and change the conversation or try to get on my way as fast as possible. But depending on where you find yourself on this scale with other people is going to change how you come out to them. And your goal might be different depending on which person it is. Your goal may not ever be to get to 0. Your goal may be to get to 3 with a certain family member, but to stay at 9 with another, or even to stay at 10 with one because, safety. And this leads me to feeling out people or sizing them up. Because, as an example, if you're a minor and for some reason you don't know how your parent or parents or guardian or guardians feel about atheists, it might not be the greatest idea to just charge right in there, especially as a minor where you're kind of under their rule anyways, and it could end up pretty badly. And another thing that's important to mention here that I'm going to go over a little bit more in detail is the importance of having a backup plan or some type of safety net, whether that be with friends, a community, or some type of service out there, as there are plenty of services that you can find. That's an important thing, but either way, I'll go over that in a minute. And when it comes to feeling out somebody, maybe you just want to plant seeds. And let me tell a quick story, because I learned about planting seeds when I was very young. I learned it from my grandmother. And basically, it's a little manipulative. It's where, let's say if you want something for dinner specifically, let's say tonight that you want meatball marinara. Just a meatball with marinara sauce. That's it. And your dad probably ain't gonna take you out there tonight. But maybe earlier in the morning or a week before, you say, hey, do you like meatball marinara, Dad? And it's like, yeah, I like it. It's pretty good. Or maybe they say, no, I don't like it. And it's like, oh, well, I like it. Or, oh, Mom likes it. You just kind of say that and then you leave it at that. You let it kind of cook in their mind. And then later on, you ask them to take you there. Now, I don't think there's really any evidence that planting seeds actually works, but I was taught as a kid by my grandmother to plant seeds, and specifically plant seeds of faith in people's minds. And this is why a lot of Christians will just kind of throw Jesus, just kind of sprinkle his seed all over your nether, or your field. Your field, that's where the seeds go. And so you might want to plant seeds, in a sense, to feel them out, because the last thing you want is, the stereotypical, hey, Dad, I'm gay. And your dad's like, oh, well, I'm beating your ass. As that could definitely happen. So a way that I feel out certain people, and I even did this with a specific grandparent, that I always wondered, am I going to invite this person to my wedding, especially since my wedding isn't going to be Christ-centered or related? Do I really want to hear a yapping from this person on my wedding day when it eventually comes? And so in the midst of a conversation, I just threw out there, I was like, yeah, I've got this friend, he's invited me to a wedding. I've never been to one of these before, but it's not going to have a pastor, because him and his wife, or his soon-to-be wife, are atheists. And so I said that just to kind of get her opinion. And now I know, her opinion towards some stranger could be different whenever it comes to, her grandson. And I get this. This is where you get the stereotypical, this grandparent's a homophobe until they find out that their daughter is bisexual, and then it kind of slowly grows on them. But I at least wanted to plant that seed to see kind of how far, on the ends they were towards a non-religious wedding. And come to find out, what's the point of love? That's not even love. Why are you even getting married if you ain't got God in it? That's not love. What's the point? And that's when I realized I will probably never invite you to my wedding. But this is what I mean by sizing them out, feeling them out. Don't feel them up unless they let you. But if it's family members, it's kind of weird. But doing this, especially if you're in a compromised position, whether you're a minor or whether you're relying on some sort of income, or maybe you don't have an income and you're living with a highly religious husband or a highly religious wife, you're a stay-at-home dad or something. Feel it out so that you can know which way to go about it and how serious to make it. And a little off-topic thing, especially for you closet havers wanting to stay in the closet type of people, you're in a better place than our other closeted fellows. Because atheism differs from something like, being in the trans closet or any of the other closets. Let's say you're in the closet about being a Muslim and you're a woman and you need to wear your hijab. With atheism, you can't really tell an atheist by their surface alone. And sure, you can have a Christian point out in a group of 10 people who they think is the atheist, and they might get it right, But also, I think it's a little bit more difficult than that. I've met people that look like like they would be Satanists. Like, I would think they're Satanists, but they're Christians. And there's also, like a barbecue dad wears khakis all the way up to his frickin' nipples, and you find out he's the biggest militant, godless heathen around. You can't really judge people by their outwardly appearance, but also, as atheists, we do have a little bit of privilege when it comes to being able to hide it. Some people who are trying to transition, but also their family stops into town and wants to see them, and it's like, oh no, what do I do? And so keep that in mind too, and just consider the place that you're in for being able to disguise it a lot easier, and use that to your advantage, especially when you need to stay kind of higher to the 10 on the scale. Now, let's say that you are somewhere on this scale and you want to move a little bit closer to 0. Go back and listen to the goofy little metaphors I gave for them. And, I paired it to a type of atheist. Go listen to that. Find the ones that are lower than where you put yourself at and just try to act as if that atheist. Now, I know acting as if is different than being it. But if you're not giving the impression that you're an atheist, and you don't necessarily want to just say, hey guys, fuck God, you can start with the little things. Maybe you bring up doubts about something. Maybe you go to ask a family member, like, how do we really know that Jesus Christ is real? There's all these other gods. How do I know which one's the right one? I remember asking one of my uncles that out in the backyard, out of the fire pit, and whatever answer he gave me was like, it blew my 11-year-old mind. And nowadays it wouldn't do that, but sometimes just putting those little things out there can make it easier, and it can soften the blow on the person you're coming out to, rather than just, hey guys, I'm an atheist. Because for some people who are closeted atheists, they want to soften that blow to make this experience just a lot easier. Not just on them, but the person they're coming out to as well. Because at the end of the day, we respect the people that we're coming out to. We love them, even if they end up treating us like shit. Because even when people love you, it doesn't mean they're not going to hurt you. Now, let's go over the big thing, the big come out. Because eventually, you might actually want to come out to a partner or a friend or a family member. And so I want to add a couple tips, because I don't want to overwhelm you as, I don't want to induce a bunch of anxiety or hyperfixation on the right and the wrong thing to do as you're already going through this, emotional roller coaster of an experience. Now, the first one, and one that you're going to hear a lot of, is the right time may or may not exist for you. You might feel like it's the right time, and it might not end up being the right time. And so I don't want you to hyperfixate on the perfect timing, the perfect scenario, the perfect situation, as this usually comes about when your expectations are insanely high, and having something kind of throw that off can make the rest of the experience very rocky, and depending on how you react will also reflect on how they react as well. And so I just want to let you know that the right time, it might not even exist for you. At the end of the day, it's when you're ready to pull that trigger. Another one, refer to the 4 pillars that I mentioned earlier. What is your safety riding on? Are your finances in check? Do you have a backup plan? Do you have a social safety net? Do you have friends to go to in case anything bad happens? If you're a minor and you feel like you might get kicked out, but for some reason you just can't hold it in, you can't wait another 2 years to come out, and you decide to do it because that's your own prerogative, Do you at least know of a shelter that you can go to for, a bed to sleep on, some free food, things like that? Make sure that you have some sort of social safety net, whether that's just an aunt or a neighbor or a friend, or a cool spot to chill, to stay away from your crazy parents while they're, freaking the hell out. Or even if you're an adult, do you have the means for the worst case scenario? Now, I don't think you should absolutely plan for the worst case scenario, but at least go into this, especially if you're uncertain about how they're going to react, because they're probably going to react slightly negatively, and that's okay. But if you have a high fear, or if there's high certainty that bad shit is going to happen, you need to be prepared for it. I was reading a story where somebody who had realized that they were an atheist, they didn't know how to come out. And about 8 months later, they posted again saying, I came out, lost my home, lost my wife, lost my kids. And now I'm living with my parents. And I'm praying to a fictional God that my parents don't find out, because if they do, they're going to kick me out and I'll be homeless. And since I'm in another state now, I'm still trying to find another job. And so having some things in order, especially when the stakes are really high, is very, very, very important. And like I said, refer to the 4 pillars. What is this writing on? Are you only losing community? Are you losing community as well as you're in fear that you might get abused? Because that's going to change the name of the game. As opposed to just, my finances might change. I might get fired from my boss. I might get kicked out of my church. Things like that. There was a good rule that was given to me during my deconstruction, and that was, however serious you make this coming out to be, they will probably equally take it as seriously. And so you're going to have to judge with your circumstances and who you're coming out to, how serious or detrimental to make this sort of thing. Like I mentioned earlier, if you're coming out to a coworker, your coming out might be as simple as an offhanded comment. While with a certain family member, it might be a 7-hour conversation. But depending on your circumstances, depending on the severity of how you expect them to react, might change how serious you make it. You might want to make it like a nonchalant thing, let it kind of seep into their mind, let them cook a bit, and then when they come back and ask questions, because guaranteed you're going to get a lot of questions. When they come back and they ask questions, you might be able to dive deeper into why you're not a Christian anymore and why you're coming out. And so coming out can be a very prolonged experience. I'm of the opinion that you never stop coming out once you come out. And a quick tidbit before I move on to the next one about being asked a lot of questions. A lot of atheists will be worried about, what if I get all these questions and they try to argue me about the Bible, or they're lording over you their knowledge on Christian theology, and you just got it wrong, you're just mistaken, you'd be a Christian if you knew this one thing. And at the end of the day, don't worry about that. You have nothing to prove to them. You don't need to debate them. You do not need to debunk their Bible. You do not need to debunk their theology. At the end of the day, you can just keep replying, keep setting boundaries, and just say, look, man, or look, mother, or look, sister, I just don't buy it. I just don't buy it. You can make it as simple as that. Sometimes that's as simple as I make it if I'm coming off to somebody that's just an acquaintance. It's like, I don't really buy into all that. And if they try to debate me on things, I'm just like, yeah, whatever. I just kind of brush it off. Because remember, as I said, the more serious you kind of make this, they might match that energy. To lead into the next one, and I actually kind of mentioned it, is coming out lasts a while, and sometimes it never ends. And I want you to give it time. I want you to give the people you're coming out to time. Chances are, a good number of them are going to be bigots. A good number of them might be such assholes you never want to talk to them again. And I know it hurts, but I guarantee you that for most of the time, the initial reactions you get, they don't actually last. Give them time to sit and think about it. Let them sleep on it for a week. Sometimes I will give specific people up to a year to be the biggest piece of shit. And after a year, if they're just not about it, if they're not willing to accept me, it's over. And that's not on me. Good boundary setting is important here. But people who initially flip out sometimes take a year or two to come around and accept you. There's also times, and I've had a specific situation in my life where it was taken all cool, like, oh, okay, whatever. And then years down the road, it finally hit them and they broke down about it. It's like it took them a little while for it to like really hit them and say, this is what I mean by it takes time. This climax up to the point of coming out, don't think of it as dropping down or just shooting up or, oh, I'm finally free. It's never going to go how you expect. And so dropping your expectations may actually, in fact, help you with the stress coming into this situation. And remember that when they react negatively, chances are they are in a religion where they view that because of the choice you made, which I don't really believe is a choice, but they believe it's a choice. They believe the choice you made now causes them to be in a position where they'll never see you ever again. And that hurts. I'll give them that. That probably really freaking hurts. Because as an atheist, you know, I hear from other atheists that whenever they lose their faith, one of the hardest things is realizing they'll never see their loved ones again. But I want you to remember specifically that that is not on you a single fucking bit. That is on their little theology, their immoral thug that set up those rules. And at the end of the day, just like they think you chose to dip out, they can choose to protest that fucking thug. And if they want to take out that anger on you, remember, you set the rules, you set the fucking boundaries. And with this, there's going to be heartbreak. There's going to be a ton of freaking emotions. And this is why, like I said, with finding a social safety net, finding a community is so important. And I know sometimes for some people, depending on where they live, they don't have a physical community. They have to get a virtual community. And I've read plenty of feel-good stories of people who are in those positions for years, and they finally get a big house with a bunch of people in their community, and they're finally able to move out or whatever. And so every circumstance is different, every situation is different. And so even if you can't find community next door, you can't find community at the town hall, you can't find community at your school, anything, there's always a community online. And while I know that doesn't automatically make up for it, it's at least something, and it's something that most of us had to at least use in some of these steps in our deconstruction. But just be prepared that it is going to hurt. It can hurt really bad finding out that, you know, your partner is willing to ditch you over the guy that they believe is going to send you to hell, or some type of freaking separation or whatever they believe. As an atheist, it's hard to deal with the victimless crime of non-belief. It's such a terrible thing, isn't it? Like, just imagine for a second. Imagine getting kicked to the streets because, you know what you said, I'm fed up. My family, my grandparents, my great-grandparents, they've all enjoyed tennis. They always loved tennis. I grew up playing tennis with them, but I'm tired of playing tennis. I don't want to play tennis anymore. And your family just cut you off. Anybody would admit that's ridiculous, but Christians do it all the time. You know, input the not all Christians, blah, 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 but they do. I can't think of a single story, at least, or even an anecdote of an atheist parent finding out their kid is a Christian and being like, oh, kicking you to the streets, and that's a Christian. Meh. Like, sure, I heard stories in church of people who were like, my atheist parents, they wanted to debate me. They said that my beliefs were this and that and blah, 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 and basically got criticisms. But I can't think of a single scenario of atheist parents beating the crap out of their kid or kicking them to the street because they decided to be Christian. However, it does happen the other way around. And so it's going to suck a bit. But just remember, take it slow, act on your own terms, and please stay safe. And a quick mention, if you are a closeted atheist or an open atheist who's dealing with the frustrations of being taught abuse or being abused and then told that it is love, come right over here and, you know, come rant with me.